Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here. And this week you'll notice we're back at my workbench. And this time we're bringing you a little bit of a different type of content. With a lot of the supply chain interruptions going on right now in the world, we wanted to take a moment and let's get back to modeling. I know over the last many years it's kind of gotten convenient to just purchase new models. And so a lot of the older models that we've had sitting on our shelves or stuff like that tend to be neglected and forgotten. And so what we wanted to do on this particular video, and this will be a 4-part series. And so what I wanted to do is to show you how you can take an older model that you may have in your collection somewhere, whether it be an old Athearn ready to roll model like what I've got here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. An Atlas model, or maybe even if you have an old Athearn blue box, something like that, that you may want to get out, but you're not really sure where to start. So this week, like I said, we're going to start a series and we're going to show you kind of a step-by-step how to get into a locomotive so that you can upgrade the sound system or even put one in. For example, this Athearn RTR unit doesn't have a sound system in it. And so we're going to show you just how easy it is to add that. Plus, we're also going to do a little bit more. We're going to go in and add the lights. We're going to put in class lights. We're going to put truck lights. We're going to put in the rear number boards. We're going to do a lot to this model, and we're going to show you all of it step by step through this series. Now, today, the first step I wanted to do is disassembly. And what I want to do is to kind of just show you what it takes to take these models apart, because a lot of people, especially if you've been fairly new to the hobby, may not know how these models come apart. Those of us who've been in the hobby for a long time have taken models apart. Going back to especially a lot of the old Athearn Blue Box, when I started, you had to be pretty proficient in taking those things apart, and then it was up to you to add a lot of the detail onto those models. And so, given the fact this is an RTR model, this one starts pretty well off, quite frankly, with the level of detail. We've got a lot of the window shades, and the grab irons are all on here. We got the antenna, the horn, those type of things. And so there's already some of this, but the principles that we're going to talk about in this series you can apply to any models, even if you do happen to have to go back in and start upgrading your old blue box. So for this first series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reorient the camera and point it in such a way that you can see what we're working on. And so I may not be on screen. That might be okay for many of you guys. But we're going to go ahead and show you kind of what it takes to take one of these models apart. So with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to move the camera. Okay, so now I have this camera pointed in front of me, and what I have here is an Athearn SD40. Now this is not an SD40-2, this is an SD40, so it's got the shorter porches on there, and you'll actually see it's actually got the brake wheel here at the rear. So we're going to go ahead and show you what it takes to get into it. And you can tell it's fairly new because I've got these foam pieces in here, so you can just take these out. They don't necessarily need to be in there, but it doesn't hurt to take them out. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this apart. Now, you'll also notice that the front of this is actually looks like it's got our 1.5-volt light bulb. So this is a fairly old model. I also noticed that because it doesn't have the positionable windows. So this is a solid casting, which is fine. We don't necessarily need the positionable windows. But first off, let's talk about what there is on here. So you can see we've got some fuel fillers on here. We've got the sight glass. We've got the gauge. You've got some of the air filter stuff under here. So, I mean, it's got some detail. You got the cut bar, air hoses, MU cables, the snow plow. It's got the MU stand up here. You can see that it's also got separately applied grab irons all the way around. And, of course, as I talked about, it does have this brake wheel on there. So you've got a lot of good detail. But a couple of things you'll notice. There's no lift rings along the top. There's also no brake lines on the brake pipes, so we're going to show you how to do that. And so there's a little bit of detail missing on here. I got a handrail or stanchion out of place here, so let's fix that really quickly. even though we're about to take all these out. Okay. So first thing is, how do we get in? Well, on these particular models, the good news is all you have to do is take the coupler. So we're going to grab one of our screwdrivers. It's a Phillips head. We're simply just going to go in there and take the screw out. And it's good to have a little parts bin that you can put your stuff in, because when you take it out, you don't want it laying all over the place. The other thing is this has these Athearn Accumate, or whatever the heck they call them, McHenry couplers. We're going to take those and replace those with Kadees. So then we pull out these coupler boxes, and we're going to do that on both sides. So we're going to get the other, oops, let's see, get my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So we've got our screw there, and I'm just using a pair of tweezers to grip that screw, take it out, and then we're just pushing the coupler box out. That's all there is to it, really. So now this body shell will come right off. And you can see the inside here, because we've got a giant weight here, and this is normally where they might have put a speaker. We have our wires for our motor right here. We're going to take this out, and then we have our power leads coming up here, and you can see the power leads right there. And then these are the wires that are actually going to the lights. So you can kind of see, and this is really, really basic, because they've got the lights just kind of wired up inside here. We're actually going to take these out, so I'm just going to pull these out. We're going to replace all these with LEDs. So we're going to pull the lights out, because then that way it'll allow me to take this body shell and just set it aside. Come on. Ooh, these are in here good. All right, let's get a bigger tool. There we go. There's one. And come on. There we go. That bulb broke, but that's okay. You can kind of see that bulb broke. If you're trying to save them and you want to use the light bulbs, you can certainly leave them in there. But for this video, we're going to remove them and we're going to replace them. So now the good news is our body shell can set off to the side. Now we have our chassis to deal with. Now, some of the things we want to do, now you could simply plug in a 2200 format right here into this 9-pin plug. This dummy piece just comes right out. Takes a little bit, but that dummy plug just comes on out. We're not going to use that on this particular installation. So here you can see we have our left and right track pickups, and they're routed up through this little channel right here on this little weight. And then same thing with these back ones, but you'll notice there's also a couple of screws. So we have a screw here and a screw here. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of reinvent how this is done. So first thing what I'm going to do is we're going to start removing these little, well, first off, this circuit board here just pops right off the top of the motor. This particular one, you can see it's held in place with this clip here, and that goes to the top of the motor, and that also doubles as the V plus on our model for the motor. And that's why right here on this motor terminal, you only see the one wire going down to the bottom, because the top one is that clip. But we can pop this little black plastic retainer off and stash those aside, and then we can just simply pull this wire out. And we're going to do the same thing here on these ends. We're going to take these black plastic retainers off, and this is where our track wires can come out. And honestly, the light bulbs come out. Not as mandatory, since we're not going to reuse them anyway. And there we go. Now our circuit board is free and our wires are there. So now you have this little dummy jumper board right here. You could reuse it if you want. I don't. I toss them aside, let the cat play with them. But anyway, the biggest thing I wanted to get into here is the actual design of the chassis and everything. So you have your motor drive lines, and they come out to the gear towers, and this is the front and this is the rear gear towers. Well, these retainer clips not only encapsulate the worm gear underneath here, but it also holds the trucks into place. So in order to access this rear one, we're going to take this weight out of the way for now, which are these two screws right here. We can just simply take that out, and you'll notice that these rear truck wires are kind of threaded through a hole, and don't necessarily need that since those other screws apparently didn't do anything. We're just going to set that whole thing aside. But you can see now that this clamp, or this clip right here, just kind of goes up against the or across the cross member here, and that's actually what's holding the truck in place. So we can actually just take a small flathead screwdriver and kind of get in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to slightly spread this apart and pop this gear off, or pop this retainer off. Let's see, because I'm doing it on camera. Here we go. Am I in there? Yeah. Just like that. So that little clip comes off. You can kind of see here what it looks like. And then now you can see that the worm gear is right here. This just sets right in. And the drive line is actually held into the motor. I'm going to show you how to get the motor out in just a moment. But then this truck just falls right out. So now we have access to this where we can add some detail. For example, the piping on the brake shoe or the brake cylinders. Anything else we want to add to it, we can certainly do that. And this front would be exactly the same. Now I want to show you how to get to the motor. So you can see that the motor's in place right here. But the motor's held in place with screws on the underside. So the good news is this particular model, the fuel tank, just comes off with a screw. So you take your, whoops, wrong screwdriver. Just take this screw out of the bottom center of this fuel tank casting, and it's a short little screw, so it's not very big, and you can see that fuel tank casting just falls out. So there's the screw. So we're going to go ahead and put that in the fuel tank and set that aside. But now on the underside you can see where there's 4 screws to hold the motor in place. And so if we want to get all the way down to the chassis, we can just take these 4 screws out and pull the motor out. Now on some of the older Athearn blue box models, instead of screws here, these were big heavy rubber like mushroom head type things that would press through, and then the mushroom would expand here on top, and that's what would hold the motor in place. The good news is later on they went to these screws, so it makes it a whole lot easier. So now I got my 4 motor screws out, and now my motor just lifts right out. And you can see these drive lines are a hexagonal drive line, just like that. And so they just kind of go right in the end, and then that's what turns them. So we can set this aside as well. We got our motor screws. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to show you this is because you look here at the underside of the motor, and you can see that this is all the negative side of the motor. Now, if we really want to dive into the motor, you can take this retainer clip off, and this piece just comes right off, but you have to be careful because there's the spring right here that holds the brush in place, and then there's the brush. And this is the motor brush that actually runs the motor. So you want to be careful when you're doing this. You want to make sure that if you have to remove this for any reason, you normally wouldn't do this, but I'm showing you this just to show you how these things come apart. But you don't have to do all of this. And then this just kind of goes in place. Now you'll notice the one side has the curve, and then this has the clip. So we're going to do that. Now my brush fell out again, so let's put it back in. Put our spring back in. Usually helps if you grip the motor body, not necessarily the flywheel. Note for self. But anyway, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grip this piece back here and then come down onto the spring, and then it just snaps right back. And that's your V-. But part of the reason I wanted to show you that is the fact that this is technically open, and the bottom of this chassis is technically open as well, but it's metal, and you really don't want to take a chance of anything here. Now it looks like they've designed this quite a bit. The old Athearn blue box used to have a metal plate here So that was the motor, or that was the minus lead, and that would touch the frame. But it looks like they've done a pretty good job of insulating this, so you probably don't need to do it. But a lot of times what I would do, especially if this was an older blue box, was put a layer of tape or some sort of physical barrier in the bottom here to make sure that you were physically insulated as opposed to just being insulated by the air. So there's our motor. Now, I'm going to show you one last thing here, and this is how to take the gearboxes apart. Now, these work very similar to the way that this gear tower retainer is held in place. So we're just simply going to take a flathead screwdriver, and you've got one clip here. You see this just pops right off. That's one retainer. There's one on the front here, or on the other side. And there's two. And then there's one that goes along the bottom, and it works exactly the same way, where it just snaps into place. So we're going to reach in here with our screwdriver, and going to kind of reach in there and pop that out, just kind of like that. We got the other side, and don't panic, you're not breaking it. This plastic is pretty flexible. There we go. So now that whole bottom casing is open. So now you can see that you have access to the axles, and these side frames just kind of pull off. But we're going to take the axles out, and this is going to do this for two reasons. One, so when we talk about cleaning the wheels, when you clean the wheels, that's just part of it. The other part of it is in here you have these bronze bushings, and they rub on the axle as well. And this is what transfers the power from the wheel to this bronze bushing, and then that bronze bushing hits this metal plate. And this metal plate is where the wires are attached. And so every one of these possible moving parts is a potential hazard for the electricity to get into our decoders. And so when you're doing this, it's a great opportunity to take these bronze bushings and all of these gearboxes and kind of clean them up a little bit. And you can see there's some excess grease in here. But you want to go in and make sure these are pretty clean. So we've got our wheels. Wheel sets are coming out. You can see that. Now, when we break down the gearbox, oh look, there's one more clip that I missed right here. This is the top piece of this truck. It's on the top center of this truck. It looks like it just pops right off right there. And that's what's got our truck pivot pin too. There we go. So this piece comes off, and now the truck falls apart. And there's all our gears inside that we can go in, and you want to make sure that the gears mesh, but you want to make sure that they're lubed up pretty good. But this is the gearing inside the truck here, so you can see how everything works. So when our axles are in place, they're all turning the same way, the way that these gears are spaced out. And so that way they're all spaced, they're all running the exact same speed, so that way you don't have multiple locomotives or multiple wheels running in different speeds. So you can go in here if you wanted to and clean out the grease and clean that up a little bit. And you can use some high performance grease like this stuff from PBL, this Trick Syntec Ultra 2K model train gearbox lubricant. And this is some good stuff put out by PBL. So if you go to p-b-l.com, you can get your Syntec Ultra K model train gears box lubricant. But this stuff's really good. It really quiets gears down. But this also gives you an opportunity to check your gauges, check your wheel sets. So you get your NMRA standards gauge and you check your wheel flanges to make sure the wheels are in gauge. And if they're not, this is two split axles that are pressed into this gear. And that's where you can space those out a little bit until they match in the gearing, or in the wheel spacing, I mean. But these are all in gauge, so we don't have to worry too much about it. So at this point, what I would do is clean these up, maybe put some of the, I've got it over here. This is the Aerocar Lubricants, this track and rail cleaner. I'm sure this is probably repurposed from something, but you put a little bit of this on it, and it supposedly is says it cleans and leaves a non-slippery conductive coating for improved electrical contact that enhances the performance of DCC and sound systems. And so this is something that I've been putting on when I put these things back together. So you can kind of see how this comes apart, and we would do the same thing on the front truck, take it apart, but we can also paint the wheel faces here. And then when we put it all back together, now we have that extra look of the rust colored wheel faces as opposed to these bright shiny metal wheels. So anyway, this is kind of how the models come apart. Okay, when you look at other models, this is an Atlas B23-7, I think, that I'm working on. And when this comes apart, now this is an older model that I've had here, but if you look closely, you can actually see that these is the same style here. So you have this this truck with this retainer, and there's the tabs that hold the retainer in place, and then that truck would just fall out. And you have the same thing on the front as well. And then your motor, basically this bottom piece would come off, and then you have the 4 screws holding the motor down in place. So this kind of gives you an idea of what to expect when you're looking at it, because here's a completely different brand, but has the same principles inside based on the design. So when it looks like HO models, a lot of times you'll find very similar. Now, to be fair, this is a diesel, but when you take apart steam, now that you have a little bit more confidence knowing what's inside of there, you may be able to find similar styles when it comes to it, because a lot of times you'll have a worm gear that goes to a gear tower, and like say for example on an articulated, and so you have 2 sets of engines that are running back and forth, and they have these same style retainer clips at the top. So the last thing I wanted to leave you with is when you are cleaning these gears out, you want to make sure that if you're using anything like a rubbing alcohol, if you do that, you want to make sure to be careful, because if your trucks are painted like these are here on this particular model, then you could strip the paint off. And if you're wanting to keep that paint, then you probably want to remove it. Now, a lot of times these side frames are just pressed into place, and you can simply pull this out. Now the gears are falling out in my hand. Let's do this. So we're going to simply just pop this side frame off, and you see it just pressed into place. So now you can take this out, and now you can wash and clean this whole thing to clear out any of the old grease that you might find inside the models. Now, it's a good idea to keep a towel nearby, keep your hands clean, because again, when you're working on the model, there we go. You don't want to get, whoops, I just broke something. That's okay, I can fix it, folks. And there we go. This is the low brake casting that's easily replaced. It just snaps in the back right there, so I'll fix that. But so when you clean these out, you can clean them out with some rubbing alcohol, get some of this oil and grease out of here, and then you want to wash them with soap and water before you put them together, to make sure that when you do put them back together and use the grease, you don't have any remnants of anything else in there, and let them thoroughly dry too before you put them together. So hopefully this little demonstration has shown you just how easy it is to really take these models apart down to the fundamentals, and that way you can start by doing that, and that gives you the opportunity to go in and clean the gearboxes and clean the drive and any of those wipers or wheels or anything like that that might be collecting power, to make sure that those models are picked up power reliably, and the less reliant on things like the current keeper. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this particular video, and I hope this was helpful for you. So guys, be sure to like and subscribe to this content if you like this. Please leave us a comment below if you have a thought on a type of model that you may want to see. or if you have specific questions. Plus, we're also available an email away at support@soundtraxx.com if you want to dive into some details about your models. So that's everything I got for this week, guys. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.